Hello, how are we feeling today?
Oh, it's wonderful. Actually, very hot. I've had
1st
to
of
put the
June.
sun because it's almost too hot out there.
I see you're holding your sun cream.
Yeah, literally, absolutely. It's been wonderful weather, hasn't it?
Yeah, can you believe it's the 1st of June and we've been all sort of treading water for quite a few months now, haven't we?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, it's been a long time, hasn't it, to be in lockdown. But I mean, thanks to the weather, it's not feeling too awful at the moment.
Yeah, this is a pivotal moment, isn't it? When, we hope with easing of the lockdown that things won't spike again. So we just got to keep fingers crossed and hope people are sensible, but at least see the world get back to a little bit of normality.
Actually, yeah, at 3:30, the kids will be coming home from school for the first time in.
Yeah, I saw some kids going to school this morning and I thought, oh, right, it's a big moment. Very big moment.
Terrible what's happening in the United States at the moment with all the riots. Just a few days ago, I was so full of hope because of the SpaceX rocket launch, which was just so wonderful.
Yeah.
To see the rocket taking off again. It reminded you of the Apollo days, and then everything changes again, and there are riots all over the States at the moment, and it's you just feel, oh my goodness, like 1968 all over again.
Sadly, this year will go down as a pretty grim year, won't it, in the history books?
Unbelievable year. You couldn't have written it.
Absolute shocker. Yeah. There's that little cue there where you said it wouldn't have written it. Are you suggesting we're about to talk to one of the world's most best-selling authors?
Absolutely. He is Jeffrey Archer, and he's in the green room, and hopefully he'll be able to join us. He's walking along the corridor now. He's coming into our studio.
Taking off his ermine.
Absolutely. Lord Archer should be with us any second now. Let's see if we can get him up.
Hello, Jeffrey.
And there he is. Jeffrey, hello.
Hello, Anne. How are you?
Jeffrey.
I'm jolly good. How are you?
And sitting in your rooms for 71 days? Or have you been traveling where you shouldn't?
No, absolutely.
We have not
stayed put.
You've both been goodies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I haven't put petrol in my car since March the 5th. That's unheard of usually. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Very strange. Anyway, look, first and foremost, slightly belatedly, happy 80th birthday.
That's very kind. Thank you very much indeed.
I cannot believe it.
Yeah, can't believe you're 80.
We're sad to have missed that birthday, but we're going to repeat it exactly 1 year later, God willing, on April the 15th, in exactly the same venue, the Banqueting House in London, with exactly the same people, if they've managed to stay alive.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, you've always been brilliant at throwing a good party.
That's very kind.
Oh, famous for that. So how have you been bearing up to lockdown?
Well, it's a bit of a cheat, to be honest, Nick. I was already going away to Mallorca to write the next book the week before the Prime Minister closed us down. And Mary thought it might be wiser to come down to Cambridge, which we did. So I've now been here for 79 days writing. And so really, remembering that I do 2 to 6, 6 to 8, 10 to 12, 2 to 4, 6 to 8, I walk between 12 and 1, I eat 3 meals a day, I'm well taken care of. I'm not in a position to grumble. The ones I feel really sorry for, I say single mothers with 3 children living in a high-rise flat. Yes. That must be very, very tough. And I have, because of the new books Convolves the Law, I've been talking to my chief researcher, John Sutherland, and he's an expert on the problems of domestic violence. And he says they've tripled in the last 3 months.
I know.
And that is just terrible. Even the thought of it is terrible.
It is terrible. In fact, it's really weird, you being a writer and usually able to sort of think up scenarios for books. At the moment, truth is almost much, much stranger than fiction.
Oh, this story has been written, to be fair. There are a couple of authors in the United States who've written major books about purposely setting off a virus that would close the world down. This, of course, wasn't done purposely, but I'm bound to say, Anne, and also Nick, I've been very lucky in a sense. I was born during the Second World War. I haven't had to face a world war. I haven't had what one might call a major catastrophe for the nation. So I've had 80 very remarkable years. And our grandchildren, I fear, are the ones who will suffer from this.
Yeah, in so many ways, not just coronavirus, the whole thing about climate change. I often
Well,
wonder.
they've been the bravest, to be fair, Nick. You and I have been pathetic. It's the young who've led us, I mean, really led us on climate change, and we've damn well got to listen to them.
Yes. And isn't it extraordinary how this lockdown has made us think about that? You know, suddenly the skies are blue and there are no aeroplane trails in the sky, and the sounds are different. You can hear the birds instead of traffic. You know, we're all starting to appreciate the world around us a little more.
Well, two things on that. One, I saw the first aeroplane for 77 days yesterday as I was walking around Byron's Pool in Cambridge. But the image that has struck me most was of a town quite near the Taj Mahal, where the residents saw the Taj Mahal for the first time ever. And if that doesn't prove something, I don't know what does.
Well, what are you getting at there? I don't understand that. What, you mean pollution?
Yes, the pollution was gone and they could actually see the Taj Mahal for the first time, Nick.
That is staggering. It's an amazing thought.
Yes.
And just talking about, you mentioned Cambridgeshire just then. You do live in an absolutely beautiful historic place. Just tell us something about the vicarage where you live.
Well, it's a great privilege again to live in such a beautiful old house, 1642, the home of Rupert Brooke. And Mary and I have now been here for 44 years. And over those 44 years, she's transformed it into such a wonderful place to live. So I'm not in any doubt how privileged and lucky I am. There isn't a morning I don't get up and say, wow, I'm lucky to live here, basically on a very simple gift to tell a story.
I was seeing a picture of the house there.
Here's Rupert Brooke. Nick, that's a statue I had done of Rupert Brooke. That's the front of the house. Actually, at its most lovely because all the leaves are there and you can see how old it is.
Just for the sake of those who don't know, he's a well-known poet who actually wrote a line or two about the vicarage, didn't he?
Yes.
About the World War and about the old vicarage. Stands the church clock at 10 to 3 and is there honey still for tea?
Yeah, lovely.
Is the most famous quoted line. But yes, he lived in this house when he was at Cambridge University and of course died tragically in the First World War. And Winston Churchill considered him a great national hero. And he falls into many people from that ghastly, unnecessary war. How many giants would we have had if we hadn't killed them off in the millions?
Absolutely. There were poets and composers and writers, young men who died in the trenches. Absolutely dreadful. Yes,
and that's the other side, of course, of the terrible murders in Auschwitz. Namely that I was at the theatre quite recently, Anne, with Mary, it seems quite recently now. And as I walked in to the National Theatre, I passed the Charles Claw Centre. I passed the Dorfman Theatre. I went up to the Wolfson Art Gallery. I came down to watch a Sondheim play, and I began to wonder how anyone can be anti-Jewish.
I know. Yeah, the talent.
I visited Auschwitz. I expect you have, Jeffrey. I thought I'd never be the same again after walking into that place and the stories I heard.
Yes, it's humiliating, isn't it? That, gosh, haven't all three of us been very lucky indeed?
Yes.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Just as you said.
How would you fancy being at the heart of government right now, bearing in mind
It's an interesting
What's-
question because I've always wanted to captain the England cricket team, which is why I'm wearing my sweater now, as I understand they're about to announce the 55 people who will be in the big squad.
Oh, yeah.
I had a word with Michael Atherton when he was captain, and he was pretty blooming rude. Andrew Strauss was much more polite. Andrew Flintoff was kind. So it's clear that I'm not going to become, or at least I don't think so, although I'm the natural captain of the England.
Yeah.
And of
Leader.
course, it's well known I wanted to be Prime Minister, but in a moment of true seriousness, heavens, it's not a job to have at the moment. This is the toughest. I mean, have this thrown at you when you've only just formed a government, either side, it's a heck of a challenge, and you can't get it right. You're going to make mistakes.
There's got to be a balance all the time.
And not only are they changing every day, sometimes, to quote Kissinger, it's a 50-50 call.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. There is no right way. What do you
No.
think of how he's doing at the moment?
Well, it's hard to make a judgment. I'm not getting off it. I'm a bit, but I'm not getting off it. It's hard to make a judgment until we come out of the other end. If we'd lost the Second World War, Churchill would have been a loser.
Yes.
Mm.
Like Napoleon was a loser when Wellington won Waterloo. So I think you've got to really wait. Actually, I'm very much looking forward to the ultimate book in a couple of years' time that tells us the whole world situation, because we're getting bits of it every day in the papers, and it's fascinating. Of course, it's fascinating. But I'd love to see a great academic give us the overall picture in a year's time.
How do you think Margaret Thatcher would handle this, Jeffrey?
Well, the only thing I'd say about that, Nick, because it was a great privilege to work with her for 11 years, and indeed to have a close relationship after they sacked her, stupid people. But the only comment I'd make is that she read chemistry at Oxford, she read law at Oxford, and she loved detail. So I suspect it would be silly to say she would have reveled in it, but she certainly would have found it a fascinating challenge.
She'd have risen to the occasion.
Oh, undoubtedly. She would have seen it as a great moment when she could make her mark in history. Because
I wonder if she'd have clashed with the scientists or not.
Yes. Well, of course, it's a privilege for me living with a scientist, living with the chairman of the Science Museum, so that if there's something I don't understand on the front page of the Times or the back page of the Sun, I ask Mary and she explains it to me. So I'm now fairly well informed for your average layman, and I have to confess, fairly optimistic about the future, though I agree with Anne, it's never going to be the same again.
No, and there are good and bad. There's good and bad to that. I mean, hopefully there are lessons we can learn. Talking about truth being stranger than fiction, I did read somewhere that you said you've given up writing political stories now because after Trump was elected into the White House, I mean, you just can't make it up, can you? You can't make up anything weirder than that.
He's a grotesque individual. I think that the truth is he's not very bright. And it's amazing in a population of 275 million that they can't find a remarkable man to lead their country. And I actually, Anne, find it even stranger, dare I plug, having written Cain and Abel and the Prodigal Daughter 45 years ago, that they still haven't found a woman to be president of the United States. I wrote it at the time and thought I was being very clever because I beat them by about 4 or 5 years. Yes. And that's now 45 years later. And now you're not going to tell me in a population of 275 million, there aren't 1 or 2 women just a little bit brighter than Donald Trump.
They did get close, though, didn't they, I suppose, with Hillary Clinton. But just talking about Trump himself, I mean, he got millions of votes. I mean, a lot of people rate him very highly, and they can see, they think he's done wonders, don't they? I mean, I know it's going very rocky at the moment.
Now, I think that may be over the top, Nick, but I think there is a group of people, I accept, saying to Mary at lunch, there's a group of people who would vote Republican whatever
Yes.
And I suspect that's 25% of the nation. But the latest shenanigans, I think, and I may be wrong, because I will prove to you in a moment I'm an absolute expert on this. I may be wrong, but I think this time he will lose. Now, I will prove I'm an absolute expert. I told the many people who came to me seeking advice that don't worry, he couldn't become the candidate. And when he became the candidate, I said, no, don't worry, don't be worried, don't be silly. The Americans they won't make him president of the United States. So you are talking to someone with insight who really knows what's going on. So don't ask me what's going to happen in the next election, because I'm sure I'll get it wrong.
Absolutely.
Jeffrey, you were amazing, really, because you were actually voted into Parliament when you were only, what, 29?
29 in the House.
Were you the youngest then?
Edward Heath, the leader of the opposition, was Harold Wilson, who was among the nicest politicians I've ever dealt with in my life. I loved Harold.
Everybody always says that about him.
I interviewed him, actually. I thought he was great.
Oh, a lovely guy. He's great intellect, and yet he treated me as an equal. And I don't mean that cleverly. He had a great intellect. He was a genuine scholar. But he was also a very nice man, slightly mad, of course. He thought Huddersfield should win the cup every year. We all have our problems, and that was...
We did win the World Cup when he was Prime Minister.
Yes, we did. And he didn't stop reminding me.
No, absolutely. He dined out on that a long time. He was said to be the Queen's favourite Prime Minister, wasn't he?
They say that, and I can tell you, having known Harold Wilson, it's very easy to believe, because he was a gentle, decent man. And that came out, you couldn't miss it, that he was a gentle, decent man.
Just talking about yourself, Jeffrey, I mean, you were just a boy, really, when you entered the House of Commons. What was it like?
I made a mistake. I should never have gone into the House at 29. I began to believe I'd be Prime Minister by 33, and I was trying to work out what I would do after I'd been Prime Minister.
So were you a bit arrogant then?
In fact, when Sajid Javid came to see me as a young man and joined my team for London, he said, I want to go in the House of Commons. And I said, well, please don't make the mistake I made, which was going in too young. And he withdrew his name from the candidates list, waited another 6 years, and got into the House, and he was in the cabinet within 5 years. Now, in my day, when I was a child, you couldn't get into the cabinet within 5 years. If you look at the very distinguished career of Kenneth Clarke, you'll see he went from junior whip to Undersecretary of State to Minister of State to the cabinet in a period of 12 years. You can get in the cabinet now in 3 years. So that world has changed. And I said to Sajid, don't worry about that. You're an extremely able man. Once you actually get in, they'll spot it. They won't be able to miss it, and you'll move very quickly.
So just talking about yourself then, were you a bit overconfident, arrogant even, do you think, now with hindsight?
Nick, if you get in the House at 29, you begin to believe you're a god. You begin to believe you can do anything. And it was ridiculous. I'd been on the Greater London Council, which I loved, and I got in the House at 29. I was on the GLC at 26, got in the House at 29. Prime Minister by 33. What was the reason to wait? And I got it totally wrong. I blew it. And I blew my political career, and had a stroke of luck when I wrote Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, to discover I was a storyteller. I hadn't realized
that. Did you know you were a good storyteller, or was that just something that happened?
Well, I've always been a raconteur. I've always enjoyed telling stories and chatting, but it had never crossed my mind that if I wrote it down, I'd get paid for it. That had never crossed my mind. In fact, I have to remind you, Anne, that Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, which you kindly have on the screen, was turned down by 17 publishers.
I know.
You're joking. Wow.
The 18th publisher paid me £3,000, which didn't make a big difference to my life, I must tell you. And
but Cain and Abel did.
You were in financial difficulty.
They only sold 3,000 copies. Well, you're right. The world changed overnight for me with Cain and Abel. It sold 1 million in the first week, and everything changed. In fact, the house I'm sitting in now, I bought with the first check from Cain and Abel. So my whole life changed with Cain and Abel. But again, I didn't know, Anne. I saw a very distinguished editor in New York, and she said, this book will go to #1 on the New York Times. And I'd not been on the New York Times list, and I'd made #8 on the English list with an earlier book. And then suddenly overnight, this went to #1 everywhere in the world. It was a hell of a shock. Hell of a shock.
Absolutely brilliant. And I've heard you say that you've never had to worry about money since Cain and Abel.
No, I don't. Of course, people don't understand this. Why should they? I don't do it for money any longer. I've been up 6 this morning till 8, 10 until 12. I started at 2 and I've come to you. That isn't the drive any longer. I have a beautiful home. I have a wonderful wife. I have marvelous children and grandchildren. That isn't why I do it. It's because I want to tell the next story.
Mm. Tell Nick, because I was trying to explain this to him, why I remember a while ago when I was talking to you, you explained to me why you often publish first in India before anywhere else in the world.
Well, they're mad in India, of course. I love them dearly. Completely bonkers. They, when I last went to speak in India, 15,000 people turned out to hear me speak. It's like a pop concert. I mean, I'm actually burst into tears. I was so shocked by it. And they love a storyteller in India. They love storytelling. They have great writers, of course. The Indians have produced many great writers. And they, which Nick will fully understand, also feel I ought to be captain of the England cricket team. But the reason they should be captain of the England cricket team is not the same reason as the rest of the world thinks I shouldn't be the captain.
But don't they sort of don't you publish your book there for a specific reason first?
Ah, good. I see where you're coming from with all those years of professional experience, Nick. You lined up and allows me to walk in and say, yes, if we don't publish there first, they will steal the book or buy it from London Airport. They will fly to Mumbai. They will have it published and on the streets. 24 hours later, they are the most enterprising nation on earth, and they will be flogging it. In fact, I was coming out of an airport many years ago, and a little boy tapped on my window, so I wound the window down, and he had a pile of books, and he said, "Would you like the latest Jeffrey Archer?" And I said, "I am the latest Jeffrey Archer."
Yes. Absolutely. It's a Jeffrey Archer book in India is a form of currency, isn't it? Absolutely incredible.
Well, they've been wonderful to me. I never fully understand it, one of the universities has made me a doctor, and they turn out in great numbers. And one lady came up to me, I have two, actually a little girl of 12. I put, who's going to write in this audience? Who's going to write a book? And a little girl put her hand up and said, "I've already written a book." So I got her on stage. Wonderful, wonderful creature. And I said, "What are you going to do in life?" She said, "I'm going to outsell you easily." And I thought, this is wonderful. This is 12 years old. And I saw her when she was 14, 2 years later, and she was still writing. And I saw her when she was 16. And I said, "You're going to have a problem, you know, because you're unquestionably talented. You're an unquestionably a bright girl, and you write very well. But you're going to have a problem," she said. Men, I said, "will turn out to be a problem." No, she said. "They're not worth fussing about. I won't be bothering with them." So I think she's in with a real chance. I really rate her.
My son, who's masterminding this Zoom video conference thing, was at the Oxford Union and watched you speak not so long ago. And I just, on that subject of writing and getting yourself published and getting your book noticed and becoming a bestseller, it was a lovely opening to the whole speech. We've got a bit of video of it. So let's just have a little look at this now. This is you speaking at the Oxford Union about what the business you're in, really.
Could hear a pin drop.
Yeah, exactly. But that just emphasizes your success, because how many millions of books have you sold worldwide, Jeffrey?
Well, Wikipedia keeps saying 320 million, but frankly, Anne, they haven't got a bloody clue, and nobody knows. You only really get the feel if you continually go to #1 in New York or London. And of course, you get the feel from your letterbox, from your emails, and from people stopping you in the street. So that's where you get the real feel. And as you said earlier, if you go to India, it's just out of all madness and lunacy.
And Jeffrey, a completely different type of writing for you was obviously the Prison Diaries. How did it affect you? I mean, you went down for perjury, as we know. How did that affect you? How has it affected you the rest of your life?
I'm going to say, the writing saved me in the sense that there's nothing more boring than prison. I mean, you sit there all day doing nothing. It's a complete waste of space. They wanted me, the local MenCap Charities director died rather suddenly. I've never told this story. And they got in touch with the Home Secretary and said, look, can you let him out at 8 o'clock in the morning and we'll send him back at 5? We'd like him to run MenCap in this area. And I said to the governor when he saw me, I said, I'd love to. What a challenge. I'd love to do that. And they decided I couldn't. So the point I'm making is a complete waste of time. So I sat down and wrote 3 prison diaries. And it was, I mean, I'm bound to admit that it spawned 5 other books after I came out, because I met so many interesting people. I met so many people that I normally would never have come across. And they all had stories to tell. And it almost didn't matter whether the stories were true or not, because the stories were stories. And so putting 1,000 stories together, one came out with some fairly remarkable things that I'd been told.
And yet
Did it scar you? Sorry, Annie.
I'm sorry, you both spoke at once.
Has it scarred you for life or not?
No, don't be stupid, Nick. What a stupid question. Do I look scarred to you?
No, you don't.
No, you don't. I mean, I do remember you saying.
It's 20 years ago, and I've written.
Yeah, it's a long time ago now.
And I've done several auctions at which both of you have been present.
Absolutely.
So those are the 2 things in my life. I love my auctions and I love my books. I'm very privileged because at 80, they can't stop me writing. And I'm lucky because so many people still ask me to conduct auctions.
Auctions are a nightmare, I think. You get up there, you've got so much sort of energy and so much, balls, if there's for want of a better word. Yeah. You don't mind squeezing the money out of people.
Oh, no. But you have to understand, Nick, I love it. People say to me, why are you still doing it? I want to do it. It's such fun. And when I can rob the odd millionaire of a few pounds for a good cause, nothing gives me greater pleasure. I will not tell you who it was, but there is one famous millionaire who never gives a bloody penny. He's among the meanest men I've ever known. And he was sitting next to the Prince of Wales. So I thought, I've got you. And I took him up to £50,000. He hadn't put his hand up even. And I sold it, the item, which was a load of rubbish, for £50,000 to him. And then said, of course, everybody in the room knows he's among the most generous men in England. And they all cheered him. He couldn't breathe. Got him. And the charity got 50,000. Hooray.
I've also seen you get squeeze another Jaguar out of someone. Some company was giving away a Jaguar in the auction. 2 people were competing equally. And you said, can we do 2? And they're too embarrassed to say no. Just need 2 Jags go out the door.
But it doesn't do them any harm, Nick. I didn't do a 2 on this one, but I once auctioned the latest Bentley off the line, which they came to me and said, look, we've got a problem, Geoffrey, and we'll be honest about it. You're going to have to take on bids up to 120,000. And if there's no one in the room, we'll have to take it back. But what we can't have is the first car off the block not sold for what we're selling it for in the showroom. So I said, fine. And it went for 270,000. And they were over the moon because they could then tell everyone that the first one had come off the block at 270,000. But of course, all the money had gone to charity. That was the difference. Someone in the room, well, actually 2 people in the room. The great secret is you need 2 people. You're dead if you haven't got an underbidder. I love underbidders. They make it all possible. And there were 2 people who wanted this Bentley, first off the line. And if there'd only been one, frankly, we wouldn't have reached the 120,000.
Sometimes people deliberately do it, don't they, just to keep it going, even though they don't really intend to buy.
Well, I had such a nice young man. I was selling 2 tickets for the Calcutta Cup at Twickenham, and I'd reached £500, £600, £700. And this young man's hand went up £800, and I sold it to him for 800. And he came up afterwards and said, I'm in a real pickle, Geoffrey. I don't have £800. I don't have £8, let alone 800. And he said, I'm in a terrible state. I only did it to help you. And of course, I thought it was a real bidder. So I went to the underbidder and he said, yeah, I'd be delighted. I'll pay the 700. I feel so guilty to this day. That boy sent £100 and said, sorry. I think, what a good man. What a good
Yeah, that's interesting. Would you say that one of your great qualities is resilience?
Well, I think I'm in nature have something in common with both of you. You're both still there 100 years later. I mean, don't let's get it. I sat on the sofa with Anne 40 plus years ago. Dare I?
Me.
And I sat on the sofa with you even longer ago. So I think the three of us don't give in that easily.
No,
we don't
not particularly.
call it a day. And we've both had ups. All three of us have had ups and downs. All three of us have had highs and lows. And I think you get on with it. I always say to young people, like the lecture you were kind enough to show, I always say, because the question always arises, for heaven's sake, burst into tears if you want to, then brush yourself down and get on with it.
Yes.
There's not, I just really have no time for those people who say, well, you know, it wasn't fair, Jeffrey. I would have made it if X or Y hadn't happened. All of us can say that, and it's pathetic.
What I do find very interesting about you is that you are very disciplined when it comes to writing anyway, because I'm one of those people who always says, oh, I'll write that book. You know, I was going to write a book during this lockdown. Have I done it?
Disgrace if you haven't. This is the one period, I have a theory about this, Anne. We're going to have next year a group of amazing novels from people who have, like you, said, I'm always going to write my novel, I just don't get the time. Well, they've just had 70 days. So they've no longer, if anyone dares to say that as an excuse again, Anne, I will tell them that's a useless excuse.
It is.
Because I've just written a novel. Actually, I've got 4 chapters to go. I've written 26 chapters of the new novel. It'll be finished in 2 weeks' time. And that will be the end of lockdown for me.
Do you write it in your folly at the end of the garden?
I write it in the folly at the end. I hand write with a thing called a pilot pen, because I find them very easy. It's then typed. That's 1, 2, and 3 drafts. It's then typed by my secretary, and I then have it triple spaced and work with a pencil. It's then typed again, double spaced, work with a pencil. It's then typed again, 1 space worked with a pencil. And that's the first time anybody gets to read it. It'll be about the 10th or 11th draft before anyone's allowed to read it. Those people who think they can knock off a novel, I mean, I suppose a genius could, but I take 13 or 14, 15 drafts before I want to show it to the public.
What's that moment like when you first see it on the shelves?
It's very wonderful. It's very wonderful, Nick. It's still very wonderful to see the cover, to see the crits, to see what happens in the bestsellers list. It's still just as thrilling. And if it wasn't just as thrilling, I suppose I'd stop doing it. But it is just as thrilling. I'm by nature, like you
don't run out of steam or anything.
No, how dare you? What a suggestion. Now, I've been very lucky. You're quite right. At my age, you might think it's all over. But in fact, no, the ideas keep flowing every day. So I repeat it again and again. Very fortunate.
I know.
Never
In fact,
by self-doubt. Sorry.
I'm sorry, you're both speaking at once again, you boring couple.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Ladies first.
No, I was just thinking you were talking about age and whether there is ever a time to slow down. Look at the Queen, 94, she's on horseback.
Amazing. She's an amazing woman. I mean, of course, I've lived through her entire reign. I can remember the coronation. In fact, the coronation was the first thing I ever saw on television.
And me, Jeffrey, exactly the same. Exactly the same. First time I ever saw telly.
Dominated, yes, I know you two are old as well. She dominated my life in that way. And to be fair, I'm no different to anyone else on this. I don't think we could have anyone better to do the job.
No, I know.
Continuity, eh?
Oh,
yes, she has an attitude to loyalty and service that I've never seen equaled. Never seen equaled.
And I don't know who's writing her speeches at the moment, but the last 3 speeches she has done to the nation, particularly about this lockdown and everything, and when she said, we'll meet again, we will get through it. I don't know who's writing those speeches, but she's getting it dead right. It was almost upsetting. It was so brilliant.
Hit the
I
spot.
agree with you. And of course, writing a speech for someone else, you have to get the feel of the human being. You might write a speech which doesn't work for the Queen. When I was writing for Margaret Thatcher, I had to think like her and think what she would want to say.
Yes.
I remember, you'll both remember him, the senior speech writer was Ronnie Harwood, lovely man, Sir Ronald Harwood, lovely man. And he rang me the night before the party conference. I'd read the speech. He'd very kindly sent it round and made a few emendations. Then he rang up and said, Geoffrey, it lacks a punchline. It lacks some humor. Please offer something. So I wrote something and Ronnie rang me up. This will be it tomorrow, Geoffrey. This will be the, thank you. And she turned it down.
Oh.
And I'm now going to tell you what it was. And then I'm going to explain how I got it wrong and didn't understand why she turned it down. Now, you will have memories long enough to remember when Neil Kinnock was leader of the Labour Party and Roy Hattersley was the number 2.
Yeah.
And in the Labour Party conference, the week before the Conservative Party conference, they stood up on the stage, held their hands in the air and said, "We are the dream ticket." And that was the headline in every paper. We are the dream ticket. So I wrote this for Ronnie, sent it into the office. Ronnie said, it'll be the headline tomorrow. She turned it down. So they had said, "We are the dream ticket." I wanted her to say, "Did you see Neil Kinnock and Roy Hattersley last week holding their hands in the air and saying, 'We are the dream ticket'?" I do wish they'd realize it's not that important because we have the return ticket.
Oh.
Very clever.
Oh, she turned it down. She turned it down. So I said to her years later, because it was a privilege to know her for so long, "Now, Margaret, why did you, I think it may have been the best line I've ever written.
Yeah.
Turn it down." And she said, "It mentioned Kinnock and it mentioned Hattersley, and I won't mention either of them in any speech I make." And that was her reasoning.
Yes. And to a certain extent, she's right, isn't she?
Well, she was right for her. You're quite right.
Yeah.
You're quite right. So I was turned
Line,
down.
though. I love the line, Geoffrey. I love it.
Sorry?
I love that line, though. Very
That's
clever.
It's not the best I've written. The one I liked best for her, I think it's the best comedy.
Yeah.
The one I liked best for her was, I did her a paragraph about women in public life and what they might do in public life if they came forward now and stood up and announced that they were the next generation. She took that word for word, and it was only because I felt so strongly being married to a very remarkable woman and working for a very remarkable woman and having a very remarkable mother. I've spent my life thinking that the next generation will be run by outstanding women, and it's already happening. I had a hell of a row in India recently, hell of a row. I was at a big meeting and they gave 5 doctorates, and I took the president on one side of the university and said, "Look, you can't do this. You can't give 5 men doctorates in 2018. It can't be done. You're telling me there's no great women out there? I don't believe you." And you know, he said, he was very honest. He said, "It hadn't even crossed my mind, Geoffrey." So,
well, they were used to very good, strong women in India. Yeah. Margaret Thatcher gave me a great line once because I was introduced to her at a party, and she said, "Oh, breakfast television you're on." She said, "Yeah." She said, "I never watch it, but I'm on it a lot."
Typical Margaret. Yeah.
Did you have much of a sense of humour, Geoffrey?
Though, you know, you can get terribly out of touch. It's very interesting you say that. Mary and I were at drinks with her once at India House in the Foreign Office. And she said, "What are you two doing tonight?" And I said, "Mary and I are going to see Miss Saigon." And she didn't know what it was.
Oh, gosh.
And it's because Bernardingham put in front of her every morning the press comments he wanted her to read. And of course, they didn't include something like Miss Saigon. So it passed her by. And frankly, it was in every paper in the world at the time, the helicopter landing on the stage. And it was amazing. And it taught me that if you stay in high office, as she did for so many years, you can actually get out of touch.
Oh, look at that lovely photograph of you two together.
That's her.
Wow.
And she gave Mary, which can I tell you a lovely Mary story?
Oh, yes, please
Lovely
do.
Mary story, Margaret. When Her Majesty the Queen made Mary a dame, I was sitting at this table I'm sitting at now on when the Queen's birthday honours list was revealed. And the postman came and he said, I have 3 letters here, sir, and they don't have stamps on. And I said, yes, that's weird, isn't it? He said, they're stamped, but there's no stamps. And one was from Buckingham Palace, one was from Clarence House, and one was from Margaret. And what I didn't realize was that former prime ministers get to see the list early, which gives them a chance to write a letter. And Margaret wrote to Mary, and I sat at the table, I wept. She wrote to Mary and said, Dear Mary, congratulations. I am proud to number you among my friends.
Oh, isn't that lovely? I know. Oh, I can hear your voice crack there.
That was,
Yeah.
That was her.
Very special.
Powerful. That. Jeffrey, it's been lovely talking to you.
Oh, wonderful. As ever, always.
Thank you very much for having this silly old thing on.
I know.
And if it hadn't been 2 other silly old things the other end, you wouldn't have had me.
It's our toy. Why not? Thank you
Do
so
give
much.
give our love to Mary.
I will.
Absolutely. Please
I
do.
will indeed. She's got a bit of a problem on at the moment, Nick, which will fascinate you. She tells me that closing down the Science Museum, of course, was difficult. But like a great liner heading towards New York, and you've stopped it, starting it up again when the government allow her to will be one hell of an exercise. And I was saying, in a way, it was a good thing she didn't become chairman in her first year, or this didn't happen in her last year.
Yes.
But to have happened just at the beginning of her second session in her 5th year means that she can actually get a grip of this, which of course is an amazing challenge, which she's enjoying immensely.
Oh, it'll be exciting.
Great.
Absolutely.
As I say, thank you so much. It's been great.
No, thank you.
We'll have a game of squash again sometime.
Oh my God, I can walk now. Can you run physically, Nick? Are you?
Not really, no.
No, I can't.
I walk, I can't run.
A woman overtook me in a pram the other day.
We'll see you again, standing up there with the gavel somewhere.
Absolutely. Lovely to
Very
talk.
kind.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Oh, and I hope there's honey still for tea at 4:45 in Grantchester.
Yeah. Oh, it's great to catch up.
I know. I must go and write that book.
Always entertaining. Yeah. Okay. I'll let you go.
Indeed. It's lovely to see you, my dear. You look very suntanned. Has it been nice and sunny up there?
Yeah, it has. I've been out and about a lot of walking, mile after mile after mile. It's been the centre part of my day quite often with Vicky, and I've just loved it. It's really, really good.
I've been stripping wallpaper and painting a wall white.
Oh, gosh, how awful.
I know, it really has, and it's still an awful lot more work to be done. But
And garden, loving the garden.
yeah,
Really,
loving the garden. Oh, yeah.
becoming a bit of an expert now.
Really? At what? Gardening?
Well, bottom grass when I see it now.
I remember doing so many interviews with Stefan Buchatsky on Morning with Anne and Nick. Yeah, when you didn't know a seedling from a plant pot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm glad to hear you've come into it yourself.
Yeah, a good old Stefan. Yeah, great memories.
Yeah,
See you again then.
Okay, my dear, next week.
Cheers. Bye for now.